Douglas Dempster is the Dean of the College of Fine Arts and has been since 2007. He is a philosopher by training and profession, but holds research and teaching specialties across the fine and performing arts. Dean Dempster was raised on the East Coast and received his PhD in philosophy from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. His background includes research and teaching in philosophical aesthetics, music theory, cultural policy studies, and the philosophy of language. Prior to UT, he was the Associate Director and Academic Dean at the Eastman School of Music, one of the world's top music conservatories. He served for 18 years on the Eastman School faculty, where he held appointments in the departments of humanities, music theory, musicology, and a joint appointment in philosophy at the University of Rochester. Well known for his record in reforming professional training programs for artists, he serves on the boards of the Strategic National Arts Alumni Project, the China Foundation for the Promotion of Education and Culture, and the Orchestral Musicians Forum. Please welcome Dean Dempster.
Good morning. Now I'm going to make sure they've queued up my first slide. There we go. So when you think of the College of Fine Arts, I'm going to guess that what might come to mind is that there we go. Students sitting in a studio in front of the easel, or maybe dancers rehearsing in Anna Hiss's gym, this is, or perhaps students training as orchestral musicians, or maybe Stanley Kowalski and Stella come to mind in A Streetcar Named Desire. And of course, I'm guessing that many of you will think of the Longhorn Band. And I'm just going to guess that some of you performed in that band. Is that right? Any of you out there? And if that's what you think of the College of Fine Arts, then you've got it right, but not exactly right, and not completely right. Because the kind of disruptions that we've been talking about this morning in journalism and other fields, technology, globalization, the popular culture mashing up with highbrow culture, the DIY, do-it-yourself hacking culture, has disrupted the arts and entertainment and culture as much as any field. Just think about what's happened in the recording industry. And so the College of Fine Arts is transforming itself in parallel with what's going on in this very disrupted culture of the arts and entertainment. So the College of Fine Arts also is the electronic music studio where students are learning how to compose music and engineer in a very high-tech setting for theatrical venues, for film, for gaming. It also includes now a minor in gaming and mobile media applications, which is a collaborative program between the College of Fine Arts and computer science. And the great thing about this is that students are moving through that minor into the robust gaming industry in Austin. And they are enthusiastic enough about that program to be paying about half the instructional cost of delivering that program. So it's even a new business model for us. The College of Fine Arts also includes the program in integrated media design in the Department of Theater and Dance. And this is where students are learning how to use computer-controlled projection equipment, computer-controlled design, computer-controlled show systems. And what you see here is something that's often described as building mapping, where you can laser scan the face of any facade, building, anything you like, in fact, and then with computer controls throw a very high-powered projection image exactly on the architectural features of that object. And this is from a 75th anniversary event in theater and dance. And the projectors here are positioned, of course it's outdoors at night, but almost a football field away, and throwing that, it's actually a video image, though you only see it as a still. It also includes the Digital Fabrication Lab in the Department of Art and Art History. Again, students learning how to use laser scanning technology, 3D printers, computer-controlled machines of all kinds. It's not just potting wheels and clay. and welding. It's now the most advanced forms of fabrication. It's also the Aplantis project, which is an archaeological project where we have faculty and students that are managing an excavation on the shoulders of Vesuvius in Aplantis, where they're excavating the villa of Nero's wife, Poppaea. And out of the fragments, they are reconstructing this villa in virtual space. And what you see here is an image of a 3D virtual reality reconstruction of that villa. It's also business startups. Longhorn Music is a recording label of the Butler School of Music, and it's run entirely by students and their faculty advisors. The other thing I want you to think about is that the arts are not just technology and these traditional art forms. It's also big business. So hundreds of thousands of businesses make up this industry. Millions of people are employed in it. And one of the great factoids that I really love here is that, excuse me, over 2 million people self-identify in the last census as professional artists. Now, I want you to know, that's more than there are lawyers in the United States. That gives me hope for America. The Texas Cultural Trust has done a recent study, and just in Texas, they report that there is $4.6 billion in taxable sales associated with the arts and cultural industry, and nearly $300 million in sales tax revenues that accrue to state and local entities. So the arts and cultural industries are big business, and they're an important part of the economy of Texas and the United States, and they're an important part of the export economy of both the region and the nation. So the College of Fine Arts is transforming itself to adapt to these technological changes and the business realities of this world. So one of the most important initiatives in our college is the creation of something called the Center for Arts and Entertainment Technology. And on your table, I've put a brochure there that tells you a little bit about that. And the whole point of this new center is to explore these intersections, the arts and entertainment, technology, and business, and to make sure our students understand how that world works and feel fluent in it and move out into the world as productive contributing members of that economy. We are getting away from the idea that artists, technicians, designers need to go out into the world and ask someone to support what they do as a nonprofit charitable activity. Of course, we do that as well, but there is profit to be made in the arts. And the Center for Arts and Entertainment Technology is an effort to explore that. So next year, we plan to be launching a new major in Arts and Entertainment Technology that undergraduates can enroll in. There's also, as I mentioned, there's a gaming minor that's part of this program. There's also a research mission that's part of the new center. And our speaker from the college today, Professor James Sham, is really one of the leading components of that research mission. He's a visiting research professor in the new center. He is a conceptual artist. Now, conceptual art, I'm going to allow him to explain that to you in the Q&A if you ask. But just quickly, conceptual artists define their work and who they are as artists not by a medium or materials or even technique. They define their work in terms of the ideas they can communicate through various forms of fabrication or installation work of one kind or another. James's work is fascinating because he's constantly pushing at the boundaries of art, culture, science, technology, commerce, politics, you name it. And he's, of course, not only pushing at them, but sometimes just kicks the door down between them. His work has been exhibited in some of the most distinguished galleries and museums in the world, including the Tate Modern. I was first introduced to James a couple of years ago when one of his senior mentors called me and said, there's this young artist at George Washington University where he's an assistant professor. And he's having trouble with his chair and dean because they don't understand this grant he's got, and he doesn't know how to deal with him. So James and I talked, and I think we met not long after that, and he started to explain what he was doing with this research program, and asking my advice on how he could explain this to his not very enlightened chair and dean, who wanted him to be developing an exhibition for a gallery show. And after listening to this for a while, I said, James, I think I know how to solve your problem. You should just leave George Washington University and come to the University of Texas, which he agreed to do for the period of this research project, which is a collaboration between himself, Brian Corgill, who's a very distinguished professor of chemical engineering, and another principal investigator at the University of Edinburgh. Is that right, James? And they call this project Rapid Design Pivot. And it's a kind of technology incubator that includes artists. And James Sham, research professor in the College of Fine Arts, will join us to explain more about that. Thank you very much.
Can I take this?
Oh, yeah, you better.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I'm going to be walking around. So the first thing is that when I was a child, I was very attracted to this idea of being a romantic kind of very, very interdisciplinary artist like Da Vinci was an inventor, where inquiry was the center of your activity, and sometimes you made things, sometimes you went another direction. I went to school, got my training, and essentially learned that there wasn't room for that kind of activity exclusively anymore in contemporary art. But at the same time, there was this rich tradition of innovation and invention with a lot of the artists that I know, whether that meant that they were inventing machines in order to make the things that they wanted to make, or whether or not they wanted to make a sculpture of a piece of the space station and ended up engineering something that would actually work in space. All of this kind of thing. And so at that point, I kind of realized that I was less interested in what art is and isn't than what art could be. I realized that inquiry was, my driving force, and that's a lot of where this program comes from. So I met Dr. Brian Corgill, who's in chemical engineering, at a conference put on by MIT and a Russian school in Moscow named Skoltek. And they brought together 25 individuals interested in innovation from all over the world. And during the week, they said, what we're really looking from you is out-of-the-box proposals for research that have to do with innovation, that spur on innovation. We came up with this idea, we got funding for it, and the reason why I have the slide up here is because this is the model for all of the collaborative partnerships that we're forming. I essentially met with Brian the first time I met him, and I said, so the art gallery to me is like a fire drill tower. It's not a storefront. It's not a place where I display things in order to get an audience or to sell. To me, it's a place that you can burn down to test an idea and build it back up again, burn down, build it back up again. It's about inquiry. And I asked him, what is that in your field? And he didn't have an answer other than it was a kind of state of mind. Some scientists had it and others didn't. There wasn't a place for it, and there wasn't any kind of arena intellectually for this kind of activity. And so we began this project involving interfacing artists with brand new technologies to address this problem. So what you have here on the right is a company featured on Nature magazine where they invented a new kind of synthetic adhesive designed off of the pads of geckos and the mechanism that makes mussels stick to boats. And it was a really great technology. There was about $14 million of venture capital put into it, and they sold the company 6 years later to Kenzie Nash for $20 million. But in the process, they tried many different applications. One was as a bone grafting glue. It didn't work. One was as an antimicrobial coating. It didn't work. And they finally found a successful application in neurosurgery. Those dead ends cost the company about 3 to 4 years and $6 to $10 million. You know? And so when you think about the story of what was a groundbreaking technology, it wasn't very rewarding for those who developed it and brought it to market. On the right is a very similar story. This is a company started up by Dr. Brian Corrigal, my partner. And they started up this company essentially to reinvent the light bulb. When that wouldn't work because of efficiency issues, they started to look for more and more applications. And once again, this process took about 10 years, took about $60 million, and they sold the company for $70 million to DuPont at that point. Right? After 10 years, that's not a very good return. And so this was a common problem with almost everybody who had tried to develop, especially in academic circles. How do you take what you've made in the lab as this exciting, brand new material with all of these possibilities and not waste a decade of your life and all of this research money trying to find the right application? And so this is essentially a very overly simplified product development model where you can see, if I can figure out where the laser is on this. Oh, maybe not. You can see that once you've got your proof of concept and your prototype, a lot of people they take that material and they go to different industries and they say, what can you do with this? I have this glass that can be rolled up like a ball of paper. I'm going to take it to Volvo and see what they can do with it. If they can do something with it, then we form a partnership. The problem with that is that you end up replicating norms. Oh, I'm missing a slide here. So essentially, when you work with industry, you just work with their pre-existing solutions with newer and newer materials, right? And so our idea was, could you replace that part of the process by using artists? Artists were the kind of people that I know that if you give them any kind of material, they will find the obvious ways to use it, and then the least obvious ways to use it, and the ways that it will barely work. And that's exactly what you need for this kind of testing process, right? So this is an example of what we're doing. This is a semiconductor ink invented by Dr. Brian Corrigal, and about 2 years ago he said to me, I have this ink, it can act as a semiconductor, it can be aerosolized, it can be woven into nanowire fabric, but we don't know what to do with it. So the first idea was, well, why don't we make a photovoltaic spray paint? And on top of that, we'll market these cans of spray paint in Brazil, in the favelas, in the poorest neighborhoods. We'll give them away to hardware stores, put them on the lowest shelves, market them to kids, and let them be stolen. Then we'll track where these cans get thrown away, and we'll find where this graffiti takes place. Then at night, we'll turn these into power generation stations, right? And so as an entrepreneurial model, you're using theft as a business model, which there is a precedent for. There's a few different companies that do that, Microsoft included. But also as a work of art, what we're doing, what this idea would be to turn what is a symbol of rebellion and turn it into a source, a symbol for a resource. On an engineering level, you bypass all of this infrastructure and mechanism that you need for real-world testing just by doing it in the context of an artwork, right? Now, this was not viable for a lot of reasons. Essentially, we couldn't get a machine big enough and cool enough to cure these giant panels outside, But this is a perfect example of what would happen if you got an artist to come in. They'll give you an idea that will be at the limit of what is possible. So then we pivoted to photovoltaic mosaic tiles, because we knew that that was possible, right? We knew that tiles could be made. We knew that the big problem was getting the electrical grid in place. If you have that already on the side of a building, it's just pop in and go. But what we sacrificed was the original creativity, the hands-on ability, the ability to affect change in the society. So we pivoted again to photovoltaic embroidery beads. And the advantage of this was that the electrical infrastructure became the thing that attached this. So you could make a modular system that you just keep putting beads on. Or you could maybe weave a fabric out of beads. Who knows? And then this is the version of the project that we're working on now. And before I go into this is a perfect example of what we're talking about with a rapid design pivot. In the span of about a year, we came up and tested about 3 or 4 majorly different applications for this stuff before we settled on this project. All right. For a company to do something like this, or even a lab with directed research dollars, you can't just change the direction of your research that vastly, or that radically. And so this is kind of the entire process is the model that we're talking about. So what we are doing now is that I'm working with a lab in the biological sciences with Dr. Malcolm Brown. I'm not sure if anybody here knows him. Where we're harvesting and cultivating microbial cellulose. So what that is if you look at your kombucha and you see those little wispy strands, essentially that's bacteria in there eating all that sugar and spinning out this pure cellulose, which is the building structural material of plant life. And what we're doing is we're making really thick sheets of this by putting this special strains of bacteria in very, very sugar-rich environments. And what we're doing is we're spraying on a solar device on top of this organic material. And the idea is, let's not look at solar panels and design them after architecture anymore, after roofing panels. Let's see what happens if we design solar panels off of foliage in nature. Right? And so the underlying problem is illustrated here by a doodle in my notebook. Is that if you have, say, a place like the Brazilian rainforest, where it has some of the highest solar yields in the world, but there's all of that forestry there. The Brazilian government has a program where they bring in solar panels to indigenous communities that live there, but the more they bring in these panels, they have to cut trees down. And so you change the way of life the more you integrate this structure in. So the idea is, if you instead have a whole bunch of leaves that are modular and can bring energy to the most remote parts of the world, you don't need to deforest. You can have minimal impact on the environment. And so here's some live pictures of what we're doing. So this is the membranes, the microbial cellulose membranes, kind of in process right now in the lab. This is where we're trying to get actual leaf impressions into the cellulose. So it's more than just using the structural material of a plant. We actually want to make a plant. What we're working on first is a leaf, and second is a fern, and third is a forest. We'll see how that goes. And here is the beginning of our first test. And basically, we've got one layer of cellulose at the top, another layer at the bottom with different properties. And we've sprayed our first gold layer on there. And when we did this, so far as I know, and as far as anybody in the lab knows, we're the first people to make a solar device on an organic material. So the problem is that right now with silicone and all these other substrates, you need high temperatures. That's why it's usually glass or some kind of plastic or resin that people are doing solar panels on. We can do it at a low temperature. And so the advantage of that is that we can try to do more and more organic things. We don't know what the outcome of this would be, but it's just an open exploration. And there we have first layer, and then here's the second layer. And probably tomorrow I'll be putting on the third layer. So I wanted to, that's an example of what the general program is. If you get an artist to play with these kinds of materials, this emerging technology, we can have a lot more exploration, a lot less directed research, and we can pivot in lots of directions. But I wanted to also show some of the artists that we're working with and how they already think either entrepreneurially or as an inventor in some way. And so this is Daniel Bajkov, and he's made a lot of work, very renowned artist, but I'm just going to concentrate on this one project. He made a perfume, worked with a perfumist in the Istanbul Biennial to make a perfume off of the essence of Ernest Hemingway. And so he got this perfumist, and he pushed the perfumist to the edge of her limits by saying, we need to add more musk. This is Hemingway. They made 10 samples, took it to the Hemingway convention and had all of the Ernest Hemingway lookalikes vote on which one really had the best essence. He filmed TV commercials for this, marketed it everywhere, and that was just a part of the piece that was shown in the museum. Now, as a side note, what happened was a local department store, Bayman's, showed interest in this as an actual product and said, we want to make this the fragrance of the year. He got very excited about this because that would be the next level of his art in the world, but he got a letter from the Hemingway Foundation with a cease and desist order. So how he responded was he sent his samples over to Bulgaria to a black marketer. And he created his own black market. And so what you're seeing here is on the right-hand side is the black market version of the perfume. And on the left-hand side is the original. And so here you have an artist who hits a snag and then decides to pivot and create his own market. It turns out that the Hemingway Foundation had no jurisdiction in Turkey anyways, and if he had the proper lawyers, he could have just done it at Bayman's. This is another artist that we're working with, Patrick Kaloran. And he, what you're looking at is a glass outhouse. So it's a porta-john potty, where from the inside, if you look out, it's perfectly clear. But if you're on the outside and you're looking in, it's reflective. And so he worked for many, many years working with this company, trying to get panels just to make molds, and they were not very supportive. And like every artist, just scrounging, convincing companies to give you materials. After this long process, he finally made these molds, made this prototype, showed it in a museum, and then what do you think happened? The company called and said, that's a great idea, let's develop that. Right? But at that point, it was a sculpture. And here's another artist, Marjetica Potric. She's a Slovenian artist, and she works a little bit differently. She works very collaboratively with communities. And so one of the projects that she's done is this hippo roller, where they've engineered this water transportation device so that people don't have to carry it on their heads. And by the time that you roll this water transportation device to your destination, it should take potable water, non-potable water to potable water with the filter mechanism. Yeah. I will tell her that. We just had a lost opportunity there. And lastly, this is the last artist I wanted to show. This is Shaguru Ban. He's an architect, and he works a lot with paper product. And what you're seeing here is a model of something that he's done in a gallery, but at the same time, he's making disaster relief housing. At the same time, he's taking this material and trying to do the most spectacular thing he can do with it structurally. So this is an example of the kind of person you want playing with a new material if you're trying to figure out what it can do, right? So those are the artists we're interested in. We know that there's this rich history of invention and innovation, still there, just not being tapped. And we know that we need it in the labs, right? And so this is kind of the model that we made the program after, where for NASA, you might have one goal, let's go to the moon, right? But all of these side goals, like what you need to invent to get there, what you need to invent to stay there, all of this stuff, that ends up creating all of these side possibilities of research and innovation. And that's similar to the way we think about this. If we say, hey, scientist A, scientist B, engineer C, let's all make a work of art together, then all of a sudden, crazier ideas come out, right? But if we say, hey, scientist A, scientist B, engineer C, let's all work on a collaborative prototype with directed research funding, that becomes a very, very difficult and territorial kind of collaboration. So if we get everybody in the room and we say, there's this thing called art, let's make it. We might make art, we might make prototypes, we might have a startup company, we might get social science research. There's all of these other possibilities. And that's kind of the model of this, that art can be the center of all of these other types of activities that don't get support. One of the things that we've really learned by going from lab to lab at UT is that almost every scientist out there has their primary research, which is what they're funded for and what they're working towards, and then a whole list of bizarre, fun side projects that they just don't have the time or resource to do. And that's incredibly fertile territory for an artist, and also incredibly fertile territory for innovation. So the way I think about it a lot, and why is this kind of idea more powerful in academia than anywhere else, right? The way I think about it a lot is when you think about the evolution of invention, every invention requires a whole set of circumstances, sub-inventions. So in order to get the light bulb, you need glass blowing to be at a certain level. You need filament to be a certain level. You need all of these subparts. So when you fast forward that to today's society, that was the light bulb, how many sub-inventions are in this not very advanced phone that I have? You know, no single person could take charge of all those little sub-inventions anymore. Except for maybe large corporations that have a hand in all of these different pots, right? And that's what we're competing against. Except for large corporations generally move towards a certain norm. So they're not going to, like we said, we're not going to pivot wildly left, pivot wildly right. I think at IBM, I have a friend who's there, and he was telling me that they've planned all of their research development, all of their R&D for the next 20 years, right? So if there is a pivotal change, they've got to start from scratch. Yeah. So the way I see it is that academia is one of those few places where you have the breadth of knowledge waiting to be connected to do this kind of activity without the direction of a corporate entity, right? Not to villainize a corporate entity, but we're just looking for a more elastic and flexible infrastructure, mechanism to do our research in. So, with that said, I just wanted to show you a few of one of the new things in the lab that is an open question right now. This is a silicone nanowire fabric. And essentially, we're taking silicone, we're making really long, thin strands of nanowire out of it. We're smishing them down like a felting process, so we get kind of a paper. And we don't know what this paper can do. It can act as a semiconductor, it can do all kinds of things, but we don't know what. This is an example of what I might say to Daniel Bozkov or one of the other artists. We've got this thing, what do you do with it? This is the last slide that I usually use to scare my students. And I don't think it's that important to go through all the depressing kind of choices that they might need to make in order to get from point A to point B, but many, many art students are facing this issue of how do you translate this rich, rich education into some situation where I'm not starving in 4 years, you know, or that I'm doing something that I love to do, or that I'm really taking advantage of all the skills that I have. And so, you know, they're looking at this giant thing where they're trying to match, you know, some kind of job with their art career, and they're lucky if they can spend more time in their art career than their job, and vice versa. But this orange part down here, unmarketable knowledge and skills, is the part that's very, very interesting to me. Because among artists, and what we teach them is to test the limits of the material and to find, to invent new things, all of this extra stuff, all of these hand skills. But most of those skills just go into, these art students and artists generally end up working for other artists or working for fabricators or working for Hollywood, making props, that kind of thing. But all of those skills, I think, would be better used in the lab or to the purpose of innovation. And so that's exactly the area that we just want to head off right there. That's where we want to hit people in their inquiry. So that's the project. That's what I spend my time doing. If you have any questions, let me know.
I was just curious where you actually do most of your research and spend your time. Are you in Austin doing all of it?
Yes, I'm in Austin. So all of the labs that we're working in are in Austin. So I spend my time half in Painter Hall and half in NHB.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes?
If this product is developed by the school and it's a market, number one, how do you market the product? Second, who does the profits go to?
I think that it would go under the auspice, just like any other disclosure agreement, in any other lab at UT. So you would get to the point of where you've made a functioning thing, disclose it to the tech office, and go from there. And I think that UT is pretty generous about licensing. And that's one of the very interesting things is that for this project specifically, this solar leaf idea, we're able to bridge the gap between two different labs that have no reason to work together other than for the sake of this art project, right? But at the same time, we're going to end up with a sculpture, we're going to end up with a prototype, we're going to end up with a research paper because we're doing something that hasn't been done before, and hopefully also we'll be able to end up with the entrepreneurial case study. And that's kind of, when I think about the metrics for success for these kinds of collaborations, that's how I think about it. Is it equal inquiry in all fields? Can you come up with something, an outcome for each field that's evolved? Yes?
So just the day-to-day, if you're a studio art major, how do you bridge to your program?
Well, right now I'm developing courses, and we're hoping to have them running in fall and the spring, where we're taking actual art and design students into the labs and teaching them these skills, just like we would teach them woodworking as an actual practical hands-on skill, except for there's no known application for the thing that they're making. So it's very easy, for instance, when you're teaching woodworking to say, this is how it's done, do it safely, X, Y, Z, and then students generally use wood the way wood is meant to be used. If you give them a material where you say, we have no idea what it's meant to be used for, then all of a sudden that innovative thinking gets introduced at an early stage.
The College of Natural Sciences has the Freshman Research Initiative, which gets students right off the bat into research opportunities. Is this the same idea in the College of Fine Arts? Offering these students the opportunity to get right into the innovation and design?
That is my vision, yes.
Okay.
I'm hoping the vision spreads.
Yeah, okay. All right, I like it.
I can probably address that. The College of Fine Arts likes to believe that it invented the undergraduate research initiative. Because the truth of the matter is, in fine arts, students from the very earliest age are beginning their own creative invention from the very beginning, often under the close supervision of faculty members, because we have a very low and expensive student-teacher ratio. So it's not really a new idea for us. What Professor Sham is doing is really crossing these boundaries that are so exciting. And what's quite amazing is how readily the forms of inquiry translate between the sciences, engineering, and the arts. These people can talk to each other without any difficulty at all. In some ways, the boundaries that we've created between the arts and sciences are completely artificial. And that's why James starts with the model of Leonardo. Those are boundaries he never would have entertained at all. So this is a re-renaissance.
I think we're out of time. Thank you so much, Professor Sham.